measurements and a lot of quantification of some of these characters in a principal component analysis of some of the shorebirds in North America. And this was my master's project, so I didn't want to make it too big. But I chose 2 genera and 7 species of shorebirds. And what we found was that number 7 is pluvialis. All of the rest are charadrius. That there really were some measurable differences in these characters among genera of birds. I did my PhD work on the whole order, and in this case, I did a phylogenetic analysis based on the characters that we coded for the whole group. There's not a whole lot of resolution here. There is some good phylogenetic signal within these characters, but I think I had too few characters and too many taxa to really put this to the really good test. But what I did find here was that my outgroup, loon, always grouped with the common murre, which is a diving shorebird, a deep diving shorebird. And so I sort of looked at that and thought, what's going on here? Why are these 2 birds constantly grouping together in my analysis? And so I looked closer at the microscopic characters. I went back and actually looked at the morphology. And I noticed that they have the same microscopic structure, even though they're not in the same order. The loon has these long prong tips, and so did the urea algae. So I determined that this was probably a good example of convergent evolution. These 2 birds live in the same kind of environment. They have the same kind of habitat. They have the same kind of feeding habits. They're diving. And so their microscopic structures have converged to look the same even though they're not closely related. And that got me to thinking about what is the function of the node? What is going on here? Why do different birds have different nodal structures? And so I decided to test this in a group of birds that has both diving and dabbling habits. So the ducks have birds that feed on the surface. They're the dabbling ducks. And then there's some diving ducks that go deeper. And we did some measurements and we looked at the microstructure, and things like mallards and the dabbling ducks have a lot of these nodes on every barbule that you look at, whereas diving ducks have these nodes and they still have the diagnostic characters, but they are fewer on each barbule, and not every barbule actually has that expanded node on there. We quantified it by looking at the diving depth and the number of expanded nodes, and we found that the deeper the bird dives, the fewer of these nodes that they actually have. And we looked at the subfamilies of the diving ducks and the dabbling ducks, and we found that they actually have more expanded nodes per barbules if they're dabbling ducks than if they're diving ducks. And so our conclusion is that these nodes may actually help trap air and help better insulate the bird. And so if you're a deep diving bird, you don't want to trap air because you want to dive, you want to get air out of your plumage. And so there may be some functional significance to these nodes after all. That got us to thinking about bioinspiration and what can we do, what can we look at these fibers maybe and figure out some way that we can make a product or a structure or a fiber that might mimic something in nature that might actually be able to help us someday in manufacturing clothing or insulatory materials. So we're working with some engineers now to try to figure out if there's a way we can make a really good downy barbule that might be useful in sleeping bags or pillows or something like that. And if you think about it, there's all these different shapes and structures. So the real challenge now is to figure out what would be the most efficient fiber if we could make one. And that's kind of where we are with that project. The most used and practical application of the microscopic identification of feathers is for bird strike identification. We have a lab at the Smithsonian that identifies bird remains. Last year we received over 6,600 cases. We received these cases from all over the world, different airports, different countries, and the whole key here is to identify the birds that are striking aircraft so that you can do something to improve aviation safety. Most bird strikes occur on takeoff and landing, and so doing something on the immediate airfield is a very big first step into preventing the damage that can be caused by birds. There's 4 of us in the lab. We have a geneticist, and 3 of us are morphologists and sort of do-it-all people. We can do just about anything except the genetics. We leave that to Farida. But our lab is funded by 3 agencies right now, and we receive about $500,000 a year from these agencies to support our lab. The U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, and the Federal Aviation Administration all support the feather identification lab. Every year, bird strikes cause an average of $44 million in damage to the military and about $600 million in damage to civil aviation in the United States alone. And that $600 million figure does not include downtime, changing airplanes, putting people up in hotels. So that is just basically what happens to the aircraft. These are some recent bird strikes, just to show you some examples of what birds can do to airplanes. This event right here was caused by 2 passerines migrating in a mixed species flock at night. American robin and the other one was a junco, dark-eyed junco. So even small birds can cause big problems to airplanes. I have here a heads-up video from a military aircraft of an actual bird strike. And I'm going to try to play it if I can get this thing to work. What's going to happen, it takes about a minute or so for the whole thing to play out, but a bird, as soon as they take off, shortly afterwards, a bird will come in from this side of the screen, and you'll see it hit the aircraft, and then you will hear, this is an airplane, a military airplane, Canadian Air Force, that has a pilot and an instructor. And if you can hear the sound, you will hear the student and the pilot discussing what they're going to do, and you'll hear some heavy breathing, and if you listen closely you might hear some profanity, but I just see if we can play this because it's an actual event that happened.
I can do close right stop. You can clear right. I can do.
There's the bird.
Oh.
Okay, we got
T6NL. T6NL.
The engine.
Okay.
Okay, around the horn, restart. Prepare to abandon aircraft.
Gear not done. Gear not done.
Just going to try to get a relay going.
Okay.
Get her from the front.
All right, get in the front.
I'll fly the plane.
Okay. Okay, engine stop. Stop.
Okay,
Okay, you cool?
so I can see the engine.
T6NL.
Okay, you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay. And Viking 2, we're ejecting to the north. We have an engine failure. Okay, prepare to abandon aircraft.
Ready.
Eject, eject, eject.
Viking 2, copy your brake out to the north.
Actually, what happened in this case was the airplane was toast, but the pilot and the student both ejected. I don't know if you heard that or not, and survived. Pretty scary when you think that this could be caused by a Franklin's gull, which is what actually was the bird that caused this. This was a Canadian aircraft back in 2004 in Moose Jaw, Alaska, or Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. No aircraft is safe from bird strike. This is a helicopter, and actually recently we have been having a lot more helicopter strikes. I don't know why. I don't know if there's more helicopters flying now or what is going on, but we have actually, we're working on a crash right now that was a helicopter strike. Doesn't matter where you are in the world and what kind of animal you are subject to being hit by an aircraft, and so you guys think you have it bad here with birds. Just at least you don't have zebra on your runways. And even large airplanes are subject to this kind of event. I don't know if you guys remember the U.S. Airways Flight 1549 in January 2009 crash landed into the Hudson River because it sucked in some Canada geese over LaGuardia. And everyone on board survived, amazingly, this event. I'll talk a little bit more about the investigation we did on that later. So, how much damage can a bird cause to a big airplane like this? Well, it depends on the bird, and everybody always says that bigger birds are more dangerous, and that's generally true, but even small birds can cause problems if they hit the airplane at the right place at the right speed. These are some numbers that I pulled out of the U.S. Air Force database for 2010. A turkey vulture caused an average of $38,000 per strike. That's a 4-pound bird. A mourning dove, which is kind of like your little eared doves here, $718 per strike, and there were 161 of those. It's a 4-ounce bird, and even something as small as a horned lark, it can cause about $4,000 a strike, depending on, again, where it hit. And these are military aircraft, so military aircraft usually are single-engine aircraft doing a lot of low-level touch-and-go flying, so it's not as damaging maybe as it would be to a big commercial airliner. But big commercial airliners also are in trouble. Now, people look at this is a Eurasian kestrel, and they say, are you telling me that Eurasian kestrel caused this airplane to crash? Well, in a way, it did. The pilot hit this bird on takeoff and decided that he didn't know what happened. It went into the engine. He didn't know what happened, and he was going to abort the flight. And so by aborting the flight, he didn't have enough time to stop at the end of the runway and ran over the end of the runway. So the official word on this crash was pilot error, but it was caused by a Eurasian kestrel being sucked into the engine on takeoff. In the United States, 172 people have been killed as a result of bird strikes since 1990, and 176 aircraft have been destroyed since 1990. So the whole idea here is to know what birds you're hitting and what they do, what they want to do, how they want to live, and where they eat, what they eat, and where they want to hang out, so that you can do something on your airfield to prevent that from happening. Some of the tools in the toolbox, and some of the airport people here already know about these things. And there's no silver bullet. You have to use a combination of things. You might have to try different things. Some of the things that we do in the States, border collies, dogs are trained to chase geese. Falcons are used sometimes to chase smaller birds like sparrows and other birds. Signs are posted around the airport. Don't feed the animals. Don't have your lunch out back and leave your trash around in the airfield. Radar is a popular thing now on airfields to try to help find out where, where birds may be. Cannons, propane cannons. What we find happens at our airport at National is the gulls will come and land right on the cannon. So if you're not moving that thing around or enforcing it with some depredation and some active shooting of birds on that airport, they may not get the message. And so last resort usually is to use live firearms, but I realize some people can't do that, but we do allow that in the United States. It's called depredation. And the Smithsonian actually benefits from these programs sometimes because we will ask to salvage the birds that they are collecting. And right now we are getting specimens sent to us from Afghanistan and Iraq, where they have to depredate birds so that the military missions can take off, and we're getting those specimens for our collections. So some of the benefits of species identification data include some things that I've put up here, and some of these are obvious. I mean, aircraft are redesigned, engines and cockpits and windshields and aircraft parts are redesigned based on bird weights. So if we know the species of birds that cause the problems, when they go to redesign an engine, they take that data and they say, what bird is causing the most damage to our aircraft right now? And that engine has to withstand that weight. Currently, most engines are designed to take 4-pound birds. That's because back when they made the engines that we use now, gulls were the biggest threat. The newest engine on the 777 was designed to take an 8-pound bird, and that's because now we have a lot more Canada geese out there than we used to. The data is used for the U.S. Air Force bird avoidance model. So the U.S. Air Force has a model for pilots. Before they take their training flight, they log onto that model and they can see what bird strikes occurred on that flight, on that day, at that time of the year, throughout history, and get an idea of what their bird strike threat might be for that day. One of the big things that we have discovered up in the United States, and maybe you guys already know that here, is you should not build your airport near a landfill or dump, because the birds are going to go feed at the dump and hang out at the dump and then fly over to the airfield where they can rest on a nice flat surface and be safe. So what we've started to do now is work with city planners and build landfills away from the airports. The biggest thing that I think we feel good about